The beats, the flow, the rhythm. All movements start from the streets. Streets A&R Podcast.
As always, we recording? We are live. Yes. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Streets A&R Podcast. It's your host, Giddy Jicky with it. And as you can see, we are in a new location today. We're actually located still in Omaha, but at the Beeman Center for Contemporary Arts with a special guest. But before I introduce our guest, I do want to make sure I give a shout out and a welcome to the world to little Avani. Our co-host Sierra has just had her first child.
Oh, wow.
So we want to make sure we give them a lot of love, starting their family while we on vacation. And she on vacation from us on maternity. We don't have a maternity policy here because I don't pay her. So you take as much time as you need, but hurry your ass back up. I need you here, but they need you more. So definitely a shout out of love for Sierra and her partner and their new baby girl. So we love you. We appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all show them some love, man. You ain't gonna see her for a while, and don't be looking for the baby. We gotta say the images from the internet. We gotta keep them off. But man, with that being said, today we have a very, 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 very special guest who has popped into Omaha of all places, even though this is the place to be. She is a renowned, I'm going to start with fighter. A fighter with words, a poet, someone who speaks with the people, not on behalf of the people, someone who's been in this a long time and has an extremely powerful voice. If you hear her, you can't help but stop. When she has something to say, there's something to be said. She's with the who's who of those who are moving on behalf of the people and the movement. We have none other than poet Aja Monet. Welcome. My man couldn't give us no hand clap because he's working the camera right now. So welcome to Omaha and welcome to the Streets A&R Podcast, Aja.
Thank you for having me. Grateful to be here.
Yes. I did just a few questions because we have an amazing show coming tonight. But I did want to start with something that your manager or agent sent me, and it's about your designation as poet. Not spoken word, not artist, but specifically poet and poetry. Why is it important to you to make sure you are acknowledged as a poet and that you do poetry?
Because to me, it feels like the most accurate term. And I think when we think about titles or names, we're really we're trying to be as close to the approximation of like what we do, right? I think artists and poets in general, it is very hard to articulate in a material way, the value of what we contribute to society. But if we understand the roles and the traditions that have come before us and the ways that people have paved the path for an art form or for a craft to be valued and to be, to be used in the world, then I think it's better for us to orient ourselves and have an idea, a more precise idea of what it is that someone is doing and contributing. Right. So for me, the reason why we make sure to do that is I think there has been a lot of political, it's intentional when people try to box Black artists into certain types of titles. And I think that we want to make sure that people understand that we come from a tradition, that we value the craft, that we understand what goes into the craft. And that poets have always been, it is an oral tradition. It is a tradition from inception that was based off of, it was before, it predates the printing press.
Right.
So the ways that people are learning about poetry and young people learn about poetry is often, it's actually it's the antithesis of the origin story of poetry. And so I think we're trying to be intentional about how we assert the origin story of what we do and what I do and those who came before me. And then I am particular about making sure that I also pay homage to surrealists and surrealist movement, as well as the blues, and what the blues provided and what how it was created in this country and what that tradition also means. So I usually say surrealist blues poet as a way to kind of orient people into what I do and give them some sort of
a framework.
Yeah. You know?
Yep. And thank you. I think frameworks are important so we can at least have an idea of the starting point of where somebody's going to be coming from. And oftentimes not try to fight some of that. And like, I'm not in the box, like we're not. But giving somebody that starting point, then you can take them on the journey wherever you see fit. And like in your introduction that I gave, I wanted to make sure I said fighter. You're somebody who chooses to use their words to bring to light, shed light, or to just showcase some of the, I'm going to call them everyday struggles that different people are facing, whether it's a struggle here in the United States for our human rights, which may seem like a first world privilege, or the actual human rights of things that are happening overseas. How did that begin in you for wanting and needing to stand on those principles and speak truth to those things that many people are afraid to speak about?
Well, I think for me, the first thing I want to say is that it's a misconception that because we demand or we struggle for things that we want or desire to be fighting, or that fighting is the way that we orient ourselves in the world. What I would say is I'm a lover. I'm a deep, passionate lover. You know, I love love and I love everything about love, and I love people, and I love our people, and I love, because I love so passionately, I value the things that allow us to love each other and allow us to be sustained and to take care of each other, to look after each other, to celebrate each other, to live long enough to be, in each other's midst. So, so I think being a lover is like the core foundation of everything. And if you've ever seen, someone love their child or their sister or their daughter or their friend, when those people are being, mistreated or not looked after, usually you're going to come to their defense. You're going to try and do everything in your power to make it so that things are done right by the people you love. And I think for me, my love doesn't have to be at the expense of someone else's love. And when I'm fighting for the things that I believe we all deserve, it is something I believe every person deserves, right? So it's not an exceptional sort of right that only a few are deserving of love or deserving of. I think we have to democratize access and our relationship to love. Love has to be a real core value. And for me, that is to endeavor with someone for the benefit of their spirit, their soul, their well-being, to take the certain steps to make sure that we're in the effort of a real communal, collective, connecting, collaborative, reality together.
Right.
And to recognize that we're here together, that we're not alone. And so for me, the other part of it is that I'm not doing something that is unique to me. I'm not like, I'm the truth teller, you gonna hear me and I know everything. And, that's just, I think that's super naive and just arrogant, not just in terms of like the boisterous reality of being arrogant, but those of us who come through the tradition of the Black radical tradition, and African people scattered across the globe, what we know is that we are not here alone. And that there are many people who, one, fought for us to be here, but also loved passionately and vehemently to make sure that we can experience the world in the full scope that it has to offer. And so there has to be a certain level of humility and grace about your time here and what you can do and what's in your power and all the things that conspired in the universe to bring you to this moment at this time. And so if I'm speaking to an issue or I'm frustrated or I'm angry or I'm, passionate about something, that doesn't take away from my respect for the people who came before me and the people who will come after me.
Right.
And so I'm very aware And over time, I've had to learn to be aware of how am I communicating? How do I become a more effective communicator?
Mm-hmm.
What are the ways that I can speak to the issues that we're experiencing that will motivate and inspire and encourage people to be a part of this collective vision, rather than to deter people and make people feel a sense of despair and, destructiveness, self-destructiveness. And I think that that's perhaps the core, that's the thing I work towards every day.
All right. And it is pretty evident kind of in your works. When you listen to your words, they don't come off as what some people would deem an attack. They don't come off like that. It's more of a, hey, we're here, we're going through this, and it's whatever you're speaking about in that moment. I love that you talked about love. Anything, I was just watching, was it Rebirth of the Dragon, which is the 2017 film on Bruce Lee and the fight. And the person who's fighting Juan Jack Man is a monk, so he has a very different stance on the world. And I lost my quote. I'm gonna catch it because he had too many gems in there. Something about it's gonna come back to me. I'm gonna get back to my guy Juan Jack Man. But in terms of love, I'll get to my actual question. Even as listening to this latest project, When Poems Do What They Do, listening to the song Unhurt. I want to the piece. Let me not call it a song. The piece Unhurt. And you talking about love being your where you're coming from. Do you see kind of in today that there may need to be a redefinition of what we are calling love? And the reason I'm asking that, because kind of on a serious note, which is kind of tearing me up in the news, I'm seeing a lot of suicide, homicides from our young black men to our young black sisters. We just had another one here in the city. And I believe that a lot of people's definition of love often lies in possession and not understanding what love actually encompasses and how to define it and how to express it. So when you have songs like Unhurt, understanding that hurt is going to happen, this is what can happen, how are you going to choose to deal with the issue, understanding that it is going to happen? Do you feel like there's that we need to really focus on actually defining love and not taking kind of the world's purview of what love is?
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you for listening to the album. It's always like an honor for me, and if I don't take it for granted, Yeah.
No, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal, and I had to listen. I just had to listen. Put it like that.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't take it for granted. Is all I mean. It's a labor of love, and it's a real special thing for me. So when people have that time with it that I feel about it, I'm like, oh, we have a different language now, you know? So it's like we're on another frequency. So there's that. And I would call them songs. I think we're trying to introduce the idea and the notion that there are many ways that we sing. There's many ways that we use song, and how song has shown up in our culture is not just, in this sort of wailing melodic way, but there's other ways that we've created songs. And when it comes to love, I'm no expert on love, but I'm a person who loves and who has had the privilege and honor of being loved. And I think we are in a time that we're in a crisis of the heart, of the mind, of the spirit. And I think that all of those things deeply impact how we see and perceive the world, and therein our relationships to one another. But more importantly, how people relate to themselves and see themselves and are able to feel agency and, self-determination over their lives, or imprisoned and enslaved and in the sense of despair. Like, these are the struggles that people are dealing with. So that deeply impacts how you relate to other people, and your expectations and what you believe you're worthy of. And so what's happening on a personal level is deeply impacting the societal structural system. And our lack of imagination, our lack of political imagination has made it so that we don't imagine what else is possible. We don't, many of us don't work towards something else outside of our conditions, because there are many of us who grew up in loveless homes, but it doesn't mean that we don't know love.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we can't still practice love. But I think it's been normalized to move in the world from a sense of lovelessness and lack and scarcity, rather than from a place of abundance and possibility and, and access, and knowing that love is an inside job, right? And so whether you have the most caring, nurturing, adoring parents or family members, does not mean that you are incapable of love or loving, or that you're not worthy of love, or that you can't identify love. I think it's just a matter of the work one does in their self to prioritize and to say, hey, I grew up in a household that did not value love, did not understand how love shows up in relationship and in actions and in care. So I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be committed, just like I would to anything else in my life, to practicing a radical, sort of assertion towards love. That love is not just a
fleeting emotion.
Yeah, but it's a material, it's a real material good. You know what I mean? That everyone should have the right to.
Right.
And I think that the assumption is like, oh, I'll get food, shelter, money, housing, all that stuff, education, and then I'll get to love. Then love will come to me. And if I'm lucky, there are some people who are very cynical, and they'll say, well, love is for the foolish,
Right.
What love, you can't have love. Right. It's almost the assumption that we're not worthy of love, and that we shouldn't expect and demand love in every facet of our lives. And I don't know that that's different in this time than any other time. I just think that we need to be in a world that is popularized and normalized and made commercial, sort of a sense of individualistic, self-destructive, hyper-consumption sort of reality, right? That we have to assert relationships and actions that are non-transactional, that are rooted in development and investment in the well-being of people's personhoods, and that if we don't experience those sorts of relationships, that we learn to create boundaries and to have healthy, limitations on people's access to us and us giving them, access. And so I think that there's so much. Love is to me, it's all encompassing. It's so abundant. It's an abundant resource, and there are some of us who have lived lives in this society with a wealth of love from our families. They might not have been wealthy in monetary sense, but if you have love, you have the greatest resource known to humankind, known to planet kind.
Right.
And so to me, there's nothing one cannot do, with love. Love is really an ingredient that is necessary in any struggle, in any developing, society or community or collective. And that if one is not moving from a place of love, which is really a place of solidarity, a place of shared, committed effort to the benefit of one's spiritual, mental, physical well-being, then I think there's not much, then we're missing the mark. Right. We've missed the purpose and the calling to being here, why we are here.
Right. No, I totally agree. I finally remember what I was going to say, and it's right on point. And then I lost it again. My guy, One Jack Man. Oh, so he was talking to a fighter that was a student of Bruce Lee's, and he came to the monk, and he was like, I won't teach you. He's like, because he asked him, why do you fight? He's like, to kick ass. He was like, well, that's not why you fight. He said, well, why do you fight? He said, you fight when you have something you're truly willing to die for, which ultimately the main thing we will die for or preserve is love at the end of the day. So if you love nothing, then you probably have no reason to fight. So just taking that and thinking about love in that aspect, like willing to give your all, and to die doesn't always mean it's physical. It's to die of old self. It could be to anything, of old habits, for something that's, anything that dies, it makes space for something new. So is that, so I took that. I love that movie because I'll just be watching for the tidbits.
I have to watch it.
Yeah.
I was thinking also because you brought up Unhurt. And for me, that poem is a poem that is really trying to acknowledge that, especially at a time of sort of preciousness, like everyone feels like too precious to disagree with or to have, political arguments with or discussions with. I think that what the poem is trying to speak to is that hurt is a part of the human process. And sometimes we move with this in the world with this sense of like, I'm not supposed to be hurt.
Never supposed to experience pain.
Or offended. And then like when we are offended, we want to take to social media and we want to take, to yell from the mountaintops. And it's like sometimes there's lessons in that hurt. There's valuable information that one must learn when somebody offends you, when somebody disrespects you, when somebody doesn't fully see you as human. There are things for us to learn about about the world, about ourselves. And so it's important for us to never make somebody else the object of our disdain and to other people, regardless of whether or not we agree, but to recognize that there's part of whatever is in the other is within you, and that you have to resolve the disconnect and the difference between what you see yourself as and what you see someone else as, and accepting the sometimes the most painful parts of our lives are the first steps forward to fully being able to address it and heal it and to love through it, to move through it. So I think for me, it's like there is a sense of, at this time, I think preciousness around being hurt or being disagreeable or being not liked or being, all of those things. And it's okay to not be liked. It's okay to have disagreement. It's okay for people to offend you. People can say things that will hurt. But let's look into why it hurts. What is the hurt stemming from? Right. Is it the person? Is it you? And then how do we move through that hurt and now not allow ourselves to become the very thing that hurt us, which is often what happens, is that we internalize it and then we try to inflict pain and hurt onto others.
Ashe on that one.
Yeah.
Ashe. We have limited time, but just a couple more questions. I did want to ask about not necessarily the relationship with, but when you are, I'm going to say, walking this journey with some of the greats, like Miss Angela Davis, Dr. Angela Davis, being in her presence and being able to speak to her, and even people, I'll say like Saul Williams is one of my favorite poets of all time. He put me on to the issue dealing in the Congo years ago with on his album Martyr Luther King, when he was talking about the issue with the coltan and the cobalt and the mines. And I was at 2015 looking into what was really happening to our people. When you, I liken yourself to some of them and the groundwork that they've laid. What is it to be amongst the living legends of people who speak their minds, and what does it feel like to have kind of that blessing to carry that tradition, that message forward, as you all are still in the fight, in the struggle for humanity?
Yeah, I think more than anything, we're in love with, the movement to liberate our people, to be liberated. We're in love with the craft of our art and our visions and our dreams. And I think it's intoxicating to be around people who are just as committed to the transformation of society as you are, and to me, more than anything, I'm inspired by people who paved the way and went before us. Not so much that they're so precious and so unique in their pursuits or even in their acclaim, but because they remind me and they bring forth within me my own purpose, my own calling, and they are very much affirmation, of what is a gut reaction to the things that we're experiencing in the world. So when we see Malcolm X, which we're in Omaha, the birthplace of Malcolm X, brother Malcolm X, is like, what is it in him that I see in myself that I can cling to and fight for and, be committed to and determined about it? Because I think what I love about a lot of the elders and people that I know who are really some of the most powerful transformational people in my life is that they aren't pointing to themselves most of the time. They are pursuing and seeking and organizing for a certain thing and a way in the world, and they want to be free just like any other person. And they're trying to encourage you to be and embody those things. And I think that for me, the closest I got to embodying it, the more I found myself around these kinds of people,
Right.
So it's like in the Bruce Lee film, they say, that there's this whole analogy around the finger pointing to the moon versus the moon, like, to not spend so much time looking at the finger pointing to the moon, focus on the moon, and I think we are a society that is so obsessed with the finger, and we've lost sight of like what it's pointing at, which is the moon, and that's the pursuit. And so I think there are great, incredible elders that I do not take for granted having access to. But I will say that there are so many people that are nameless that do incredible, profound work and have made it possible, for people like Saul Williams to be where he is and Angela Davis. And it's important for us to recognize that individuals come from communities and they're a part of fabrics of many, 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 many people who poured into them. And for me, Saul was a part of my community. I was someone that poured into Saul and Saul poured into me, and we have a real, relationship based on our love of poetry, but our love for our people. Angela Davis is the same. If I think about, my godfather from the Last Poets, Abiodun Oyewole, he's like a father figure to me, right? But the thing that I love about him is what he brings out in me, what he reminds me of myself, and what I feel called forth to do and to become because of it. And I think that that's the hope, is that when we look to leaders or we look to other people to inspire us, it's for us to remember that it's within us. What we see in them that we fall in love with is literally what's within us. And so it's up to us to remember, yes, to show love and to pay homage, but to remember they're people. They're part of communities, and we are only possible because of each other, because of the collective effort to do things for and with each other. Angela Davis became Angela Davis not because she was trying to be famous or because she was trying to be the most revolutionary vocal artist. She was a scholar for all intents and purposes. She's an academic. And this is a sister who was in struggle with other, liberation, freedom fighters and people who loved our people. And the world rallied for her, the community, the society, and so she understands that her image is no longer just hers. It now belongs to the struggle for freedom, And I think that that's what's important for us, is to remember to never fall in love too much with the idea of individualism, but to remember that those that we lift up who have made sacrifices, who have struggled in the efforts of us, that they have had to do that sometimes at the expense of their own well-being and their own benefits. But we do it, and they do it because people loved them and because they love people and they are in relationship with real everyday folks, you know? So I say that to say, I've never, ever tried to miss an opportunity to be at an elder's feet, to listen, to learn, whether they are on somebody's t-shirt or somebody just walking down the street, sitting on a front stoop somewhere. You know, people always have the ability to, there's angels, you know, many angels that we come across in our lives. And I think it would benefit many of us if we took the time to notice and just pay a little attention in our own communities. You know,
just to sit down, random thought, but that's one of my life goals, is to be the old dude sitting on the porch talking shit to and people like, why? Did not go into the in depth, like, but that is, if I can do that and impart wisdom and joy as the youngsters are walking around, and I can do that free of charge, then I feel like I've made it in this world. If I can even afford to do that. Yeah. So that's one of my actual life goals, is to sit on the porch and just spit game, talk trash, but, you know, enlighten in the same, be an elder.
Yeah.
We have few, but the few we have are still powerful and they're making moves. Just so I know we have to wrap this up really quick. I thoroughly, you know, I think everybody wants listening to this album, Black Joy, in a place, in a time, especially in America, where they say we don't have culture. I think every Black person, meaning people who grew up in Black communities or around Black people who are in Black communities, identify with nearly, if not everything that was spoken. But that speaks to us having a culture, our norms, our traditions in every facet, whether we're talking, everybody knows about the belt or the switch. Now that's even in punishment, but that's something cultural. We talk about the hair, the laughter, the gestures. I can say, in short, whatever that means for you. But
I'm always long-winded.
Right. What did it mean to really try to express in that poem what Black joy is? And it's not just that everything in there is happy. It's the fact that our existence is joy. That's why you listed a litany of things that come across in Black life. Yeah. So what did it mean for you to just be able to express that in Black joy?
Well, you know, when the album came out, it was a labor of love, I say, because there was a lot of work that went into making the album and for it to actually be in the world. And I lost a lot of people within the year of me releasing the album. And the reason why I mention that is because every time now I think about Black Joy, I think about what it was like to write that poem and why I wrote that poem. And I wrote it in the time when, like, you know, in the movement for Black lives, we were experiencing Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, and a lot of death was like the conversation within our movement. And I was organizing and living in Florida and Miami. And I was home trying to write this new poem. And I had this idea about doing something for Black joy. And I spoke to, you know, a friend and comrade and brother, Daniel Agnew, who is no longer with us. And when I think about that poem now, I just think about, and people ask me about it, I just think about him and like what it was to write that piece. And like when I was talking to him about it, and I was always thinking about, you know, even when we did the album release and he was there, I had shouted him out because it was just, there are certain poems that when you're writing them, you know, just like any song or any art piece, you remember the time you were in, you remember the people you were around, it just brings you back. And so for me, when I was talking to Daniel about the poem, one of the ways that I wrote the poem was going to him and being like, okay, what are all the things that, you know, bring us joy? Come on, we gotta make a list. I want people to be shouting, you know, this and that. And I gave him, recited some of the things that I had already had. And he was like, oh, you got to talk about this. Don't forget this, you know? And at first it was just this long list poem, and I was like, oh, people are going to probably be like, this is too long. And I was like, but then that goes to show the vastness of our expression and of our joy. And it became, one of his favorite poems, and became our community's favorite poem. And so people used to kind of like joke at me about, they would mock me and recite the poem when I would show up to the function or the protest. They'd be like, joy is, and it became this sort of, it became the community's poem. And for me, I think that that's the thing that brings me so much joy about it, is that, I will always have that. I will always have the experience of creating in community with people I love. And what I created is no longer just me. It's us. It's a collaboration. And so that's very important and integral to my creative process. There are certain people who believe they have to be far off in the woods somewhere by themselves. But I've always been very much inspired by the people who are around me and the people I'm in conversation with and I'm learning from and I'm organizing with. And those things pour into the process. So for me, that Black Joy, it's a poem that reflects our culture, but it took our culture to make it, It would not exist without our culture. And so I see it as a stamp of sort of approval from my community and love that like, it's nice to have a poem where like people are like, yo, that's my jam, and for a poem to be that, for a poem to do that, oh man, you live your whole life trying to create poems that do that, and I don't think I've written my best poem yet, but this album has shown me that there are certain poems that people hold dear and it brings certain things to surface for them. And that's the most rewarding, like inspiring thing that keeps you going, is like tour is stressful, but the most beautiful thing is to be on stage with those musicians and to see your poems reflected back to you in the faces of the people reciting the words or say, yelling at you. That's my, and dancing. I remember I was in London. We did a show for Palestine and for the Congo, and it was, it was a lot of like Palestinian people, but there was this community of African people in the cut, and they were just jamming to Black Joy, and they like recorded them dancing to that poem, and then at the end, like they were like, Black Joy, that poem, and they're just telling me about how much that poem means to them, and that really. Man, you can't, there's no amount of money or success that can ever take the feeling of your people being really proud and you doing something you creating something that, that makes them proud. I think that's such an honor,
I do. Man, thank you for that. That's what happens when you're authentic. It allows other people to touch other people in their heart space. So, we don't have enough time to get to.
But thank you.
We'll definitely have to have you back, which we will. And we'll talk to you later about some of those opportunities. But
I want to be back at Omaha. It looks like you guys are doing some incredible work. And just shout out to you for doing this, for trying to get me on this and make this happen. Thank you, cameraman, for making time to come
Young God.
It's not lost on me. Trying to do anything, start anything up is a lot. You know what I mean? But keep going, and anything I could do to support, I will. And just shout out to all the people making things move in Omaha, trying to organize and make some change. I think, I'm inspired when I travel and I see you, I see y'all. So that keeps me going because, we feel alone and isolated in our little parts of the world, and we forget that we're together no matter where we are,
This is true. We definitely thank you for taking the time. You have a performance to get ready for.
Yeah, let's do it.
Will you have just let the people know where they can find you at online?
I am on the socials, you know what I mean? Because that's where the youngins be. But and the oldies too.
Right.
Eldest too. But I'm on, the Instagrams, the Twitters, the whatevers. But you can find like the album and all the stuff on my website, which is www.ajamonet.com. And I have an organization let me not forget this, that I'm a part of. I'm the artistic creative director for this project called Voices. So if you get a chance, please go to vday.org or visforvoices.com. And you can listen to a new project that we just streamed and released that I think is really beautiful. It's a story, audio play of a bunch of Black women, African women across the globe. And it's a really powerful piece. So if you want to hear the album, you can find When the Poems Do What They Do on all streaming platforms. But also this incredible collective project that I worked on, you can find that as well on all streaming platforms. It's called Voices, A Sacred Sisterscape.
Thank you so much. Make sure y'all follow and tap in with our poet, Aja Monet. Make sure you stay tuned in with Streets A&R. We have more things to come. We definitely appreciate you coming. You all know the drill. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment, post, send to a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend. That Streets A&R is Streets A&R. We're on everything but Apple. Make sure y'all come holler at us, man. We appreciate you, Sister Monet, and we out of here. Peace.
The beats, the flow, the rhythm. All movement starts from the streets. Streets A&R Podcast.